That cardinal on your feeder almost didn't make it this morning. Right now, it looks calm. The sun is climbing over the trees. The yard feels peaceful. Maybe you're standing at the kitchen window with your first cup of coffee. Maybe you've seen this same flash of red so many times that it feels ordinary. But something happened to that bird last night, something you never saw, and if just a few small decisions had gone differently yesterday, it might not be sitting there now. That's the part most people miss. We look at a bird and see a quiet morning. The bird is recovering from a survival test. Long before sunrise, while the neighborhood was still asleep, that cardinal was hidden somewhere nearby. Not far away. Maybe in a dense evergreen shrub. Maybe deep inside a tangle of branches you've walked past 100 times without noticing. The goal wasn't comfort. The goal was survival. A sleeping bird is a vulnerable bird. Every evening, a cardinal has to choose where to spend the night. Too exposed, and it risks being seen. Too sheltered in the wrong place, and other dangers appear. What looks like an ordinary bush to us can become a carefully selected shelter in a world where awareness matters. And even sleep is not quite what we imagine. Researchers studying birds have found that many species can use a form of sleep called unihemispheric sleep, where one side of the brain rests while the other remains more alert to the environment. In other words, the bird never completely disconnects from the world around it. Imagine trying to sleep while keeping part of your attention on every sound outside your door. That is much closer to a bird's reality. Then comes dawn. The first light appears. The cardinal wakes. But here's where the story becomes surprising. The first thing it needs is not food. It needs information. For several minutes, it listens, a distant call, movement in the brush, the sound of another bird. The absence of a sound that should be there. Before breakfast comes awareness. Before action comes assessment. You think the day starts when the bird arrives at the feeder. To the bird, the day started with surviving the night. And that changes everything. Because the bird you're looking at is not spending its day relaxing in your yard. It is about to enter a race against time, energy, weather, and uncertainty. The strangest part, the most important decisions of the entire day may happen before noon. If birds have become part of your mornings too, I'd love for you to stay with us on this journey. Every yard tells a different story, and every familiar bird turns out to be far less ordinary than it first appears. Now the race begins as the cardinal leaves the feeder and slips quietly into the branches. And this is often the moment when people misunderstand what they are witnessing. At first glance, it seems as though the bird is simply searching for breakfast, but that is not quite true, at least not yet. In the earliest hours of the morning, information is often more important than food, and some of the most valuable things this bird will gather today cannot be eaten at all. If you listen carefully on a spring morning before the neighborhood fully awakens, you will notice that the air is alive with sound. A robin calling from across the street, a chickadee hidden somewhere in a maple tree, a wren singing from a fence line. To us, these sounds may seem like pleasant background music for the day ahead, but to the cardinal they form a constant stream of updates about the world around it. Researchers who study the dawn chorus have found that birds often sing most intensely around sunrise, partly because sound resonates especially well through the cool, still air of early morning, and partly because the first hour of daylight is when information carries the greatest value. Every song provides an answer to an important question. Who is here? Who survived the night? Which territories are occupied? And where the boundaries lie today? The cardinal joins this chorus from a high perch, not because it enjoys making noise, but because each note carries a message that says, "This place is occupied, I am still here, and I am healthy enough to defend what is mine." Those messages matter to rival cardinals, to potential mates, and even to neighboring birds of entirely different species. Yet what makes this even more fascinating is that the cardinal is not only sending information into the world, it is also listening constantly. A sudden silence in one corner of the yard, an alarm call from a chickadee, or the sharp warning notes of a blue jay can all reveal something important. These signals travel through a neighborhood far faster than any single bird could discover danger on its own. Scientists at the University of Washington and other institutions studying bird communication have shown that many species can understand and respond to alarm calls made by completely different species. Imagine living in a town where everyone instantly shares important news with one another. That is essentially what the morning forest sounds like to a bird. As the cardinal moves from branch to branch, it quietly builds a mental map of its surroundings, marking safe areas, risky locations, productive feeding spots, and quiet zones. Many people assume that intelligence in nature belongs only to the strongest animals, but the longer you observe, the more another truth emerges. Survival often belongs to the best listeners. A bird that learns about a threat early can avoid it, and a bird that notices change before others gains a valuable advantage. So while most people imagine the morning as a simple search for food, the cardinal is still collecting something even more precious: knowledge. Because before it can decide where to go, it must first understand what kind of day it has awakened into. And very soon, all of that carefully gathered information will face its next test, finding enough energy to keep going. Now, all of that information has to be turned into action. The cardinal has spent the first part of its morning listening, watching, and quietly mapping the world around it. Yet information alone cannot keep a bird alive. Energy can, and this is where the story becomes far more complex than most people realize. What appears to be a bird feeding is, in reality, a bird investing, with every movement becoming part of an invisible economy where energy flows in and out, every choice carries a cost, and every mistake leaves a consequence. When the cardinal lands near a patch of seeds beneath a feeder, a sunflower seed may look like nothing more than a tiny snack to us, but to the bird it represents fuel, time, opportunity, and risk all at once. Even before picking up that seed, the cardinal is already weighing a series of questions. How much energy will this provide? How long will it take to crack open? How exposed is this location? How close is the nearest shrub if cover is suddenly needed? What seems like a simple meal is actually a carefully considered decision. Researchers at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology have documented how backyard birds consistently favor feeding locations that strike a balance between food value and safety, because even the richest food source loses its appeal if obtaining it requires unnecessary danger. That is why the cardinal rarely remains in the open for long. It feeds, pauses, scans its surroundings, and then moves again, each stop fitting into a broader strategy. Yet seeds are only part of the equation. As the morning unfolds, the cardinal begins searching for insects: a caterpillar tucked beneath a leaf, a beetle moving through the grass, or a small spider hidden among the branches. While seeds provide valuable energy, insects supply protein and nutrients that are equally essential, forcing the bird to balance two different needs at the same time. One food source delivers calories, while the other supports feather health, muscle maintenance, and overall condition. The challenge, however, is that finding insects often demands greater effort, requiring more searching, more movement, and more energy spent before any reward is gained. This is where the economics of survival become truly fascinating. Studies from the University of Oxford examining foraging decisions have shown that animals often weigh effort against reward in remarkably sophisticated ways. The cardinal does not perform mathematics in the human sense, of course, but its behavior reflects the same principle. Spend too much energy finding food and the benefit disappears. Spend too little effort and there may not be enough food to make a difference. Somewhere between those extremes lies the balance that survival demands. As the sun climbs higher, another interesting shift occurs and the cardinal begins to slow down. Most people assume this means it is resting, but in reality, part of what follows is digestion. Scientists studying bird metabolism have found that feeding is only one stage of energy collection, because processing food requires time as well. The bird cannot simply eat continuously from sunrise to sunset. There are moments when stopping actually increases efficiency. This is one of those moments when nature quietly challenges human expectations. We often imagine survival as a state of constant activity, yet sometimes the wisest move is stillness. The cardinal settles onto a branch and remains there for several minutes. From the outside, it appears inactive, but inside its body energy is being extracted, stored, and prepared for the next phase of the day. Soon, another decision emerges. Should it fly to a nearby tree filled with natural food sources or remain close to the feeder where food is easier to find? Once again, there is no perfect answer. Flying consumes energy, while staying put may limit opportunity. Researchers from the University of California studying avian energetics have found that flight is among the most expensive activities in a bird's daily energy budget, meaning every unnecessary trip matters and every extra wing beat carries a cost. Viewed through this lens, the cardinal's movements begin to look very different. It is not wandering aimlessly. It is budgeting, managing its resources with remarkable precision. And the longer you watch, the more clearly one important truth emerges. The bird is not trying to maximize food, it is trying to maximize survival, and those are not always the same thing. A location with slightly less food, but greater safety, may be the wiser choice. A shorter flight may preserve valuable energy for later, and a pause beneath the shade may offer more benefit than another minute of searching. Each hour becomes a sequence of investments, withdrawals, gains, and losses, and for a creature that weighs little more than a handful of coins, the margin for error is astonishingly small. Yet here is the part most people rarely consider. As demanding as these calculations have been, the most dangerous part of the day is still ahead, because very soon the challenge will no longer be finding energy, it will be protecting it. By early afternoon, something curious begins to unfold as the yard gradually grows quieter and the energetic rhythm of the morning slowly fades away. The cardinal is no longer darting constantly between branches, shrubs, and feeding spots. Instead, there may be long stretches when it seems to be doing very little at all. Yet this is precisely the moment when many people stop paying attention, because we are naturally drawn to action, movement, feeding, flying, singing, and gathering. What often escapes our notice is that some of the most important survival decisions are made during the hours that appear uneventful, and those decisions frequently look like inactivity. As the sun climbs higher, the environment changes with it. A pleasant spring morning can gently transform into a warm afternoon, and during summer the temperature may rise dramatically. For a small bird wrapped in feathers, managing heat becomes every bit as important as finding food. Unlike humans, a cardinal cannot simply remove a layer when it feels too warm, so it must regulate its body temperature through behavior, leading it to focus on an entirely different set of priorities, not where food can be found or where territorial boundaries lie, but where shade lingers longest, which side of tree receives less direct sunlight, and which patch of vegetation offers the best protection from both heat and exposure. Researchers who study heat stress in birds have found that extreme temperatures can pose serious challenges, especially during prolonged periods of hot weather. In such conditions, the wisest choice is often not to search for more food, but to conserve energy and avoid overheating. To us, a bird resting quietly in the shade may appear inactive, yet to the bird that shaded perch may represent one of the most important decisions of the entire day. Then there are the feathers, which many people assume exist mainly for flight. In reality, they are essential survival equipment, providing insulation during cold nights, protection from the elements, and the aerodynamic efficiency needed for flight. When feathers become damaged, every journey through the air demands more energy, which is why the cardinal spends part of the afternoon carefully preening. It draws its beak through each feather with remarkable precision, aligning delicate structures, removing debris, and maintaining the tools that make survival possible. Scientists studying feather maintenance have shown that both flight feathers directly influence both flight performance and insulation, meaning that what appear to be simple groomings is actually a vital form of maintenance. is in fact survival. For many cardinals, there is also another responsibility waiting nearby. Hidden somewhere in the yard may be a nest, perhaps tucked deep within a dense shrub or concealed among thick branches. If eggs or young chicks are present, the work never truly stops. One parent may remain at the nest while the other searches for food, and the temperature inside that nest can be critically important. Researchers studying nest temperature regulation have found that even small changes in heat can affect developing chicks, making a brief and seemingly ordinary visit to the nest far more significant than it appears. Just a few minutes of care can have lasting consequences. This is where the story begins to feel surprisingly familiar, because we often imagine progress as something dramatic, visible, and easy to recognize, when in reality, many of the most important things in life happen during periods that seem quiet from the outside, times of recovery, preparation, maintenance, and care. Of course, the cardinal understands none of these concepts in human terms, yet its daily routine reflects them perfectly. While the yard appears calm and still, an entire series of invisible decisions continues to unfold, and as the afternoon gradually gives way to evening, another challenge begins to emerge. The bird has spent the day protecting its energy, and soon it will need to gather enough of it once again to survive the coming night. As evening approaches, the entire day seems to gently converge toward a single deadline. The light grows softer, shadows stretch farther across the yard, and the bustle of the afternoon gradually fades away. Yet, for the cardinal, time is quietly becoming more urgent as everything it has done since dawn begins to connect into a larger picture. The information gathered in the morning, the energy accumulated throughout the day, and the countless careful choices about risk, movement, shade, and safety all lead to this moment. Another night is approaching, and once darkness settles in, there will be no opportunity to feed again until morning. That is why many birds enter a phase scientists call hyperphagia, a period when feeding activity increases as they prepare for the long hours ahead. The cardinal returns to familiar feeding spots with a renewed sense of purpose, no longer simply replacing the energy it has spent, but actively building a reserve for the night to come. Every seed becomes a little more valuable, every calorie a little more important. Because through the darkness, those stored resources will help maintain body temperature and support the essential functions that keep the bird alive until sunrise returns. Yet food is only one part of the preparation. Another important decision remains: where to spend the night. Once again, the cardinal surveys the yard, paying attention to dense shrubs, evergreen cover, and quiet corners sheltered from wind and exposure. Just as it did the evening before, it searches for a place that offers the ideal balance between protection and awareness. Although the day is drawing to a close, the calculations never truly stop, and even now, each choice can carry significant consequences. Then, almost without realizing it, we find ourselves back where we began, looking at the same bird in the same yard, perched among the same branches catching the final light of the day. Yet something feels different. This morning, the cardinal may have seemed like nothing more than a simple visitor passing through for a few moments, but now we understand that what appeared to be an ordinary day was actually a continuous chain of decisions. Decisions about gathering information, managing energy, avoiding danger, and ultimately surviving. The bird in your yard is not living a simple life. It is solving hundreds of challenges every day just for the chance to witness another sunrise. Perhaps that is why stories like this are so fascinating, because they transform the way we see an ordinary backyard. The cardinal outside the window no longer feels like a fleeting visitor, but rather a small, wild creature undertaking a demanding journey that most of us rarely notice. That perspective may not be strictly scientific. It is simply my own. Still, after understanding how much can happen in the course of a single day, it becomes difficult not to feel a deeper sense of respect for the birds we encounter each morning. The yard may appear quiet, and the bird may seem calm, but now you know that beneath that calm exterior exists an entire hidden world, unfolding through one decision after another.